Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking the theory of Scrum and evidence-based management and transforming it into a dynamic, practical engine for actually delivering value. If you're working in an environment where shifting requirements and complexity are just the daily norm, well, you are definitely in the right place.
Let's just dive right in. Think about your last major project launch. Honestly, how much actually changed between that rigid initial plan everyone signed off on and what you finally delivered? Because for most of us, that gap right there, that's exactly where the chaos lives. You start with these grand assumptions, reality hits you hard, and suddenly you're over budget, behind schedule, and literally delivering something the customer doesn't even want anymore. It's an incredibly frustrating cycle. But hey, it absolutely doesn't have to be your reality.
To demystify the whole process, here's our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting the Agile Scrum solution, the empirical Scrum engine, who makes Scrum work, the rhythm of sprints, real-world business agility, and finally, knowing Scrum's exact limits.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the Agile Scrum solution. We're talking about moving from rigid plans to adaptive delivery. Traditional project management, the classic waterfall model, is essentially a massive gamble. You do all this heavy planning up front based on fixed requirements, you lock it all in, and then you just kind of cross your fingers and hope for the best. Customer involvement is basically non-existent until the very end, which means your risk of building the totally wrong thing is dangerously high. Scrum flips this entire script. By using adaptive planning, you're delivering frequent working increments. The customer is constantly in the loop, giving you immediate feedback, and that keeps your overall risk incredibly low.
Moving to Section 2, the empirical Scrum engine. This is all about being driven by real data, not just assumptions.
So this empirical engine is actually powered by three interconnected pillars. First up is transparency, literally making the process and the work completely visible to everybody involved. But here's the thing. Transparency is basically useless without the second pillar, which is inspection. The team has to frequently check in on their progress and their processes. And finally, adaptation. Based on those frequent inspections, the team makes immediate adjustments. They don't wait around for some 6-month postmortem. They pivot right then and there in real time.
Now, all those mechanics of transparency and inspection, they will totally fall apart without trust. And that means the team actually has to live out 5 core values every single day. We're talking commitment to the goals, focus on the work, openness regarding challenges, respect for one another, and the courage to tackle the really tough problems. These behavioral foundations are the secret sauce. They're what actually make agility possible in the real world.
Next up is Section 3, who makes Scrum work? Let's look at the triad of Scrum roles.
First up in this triad, we have the Scrum Master. And notice, I definitely didn't say Project Manager. The Scrum Master acts as a crucial shield and a coach for the team. Sure, their job is to make sure the Scrum process is being followed, but more importantly, they're the ones removing impediments. Those annoying roadblocks that just drag the team down? They keep outside distractions at bay, they help develop the team's ability to self-organize, and they even drive agile transformation across the broader organization. They really are the ultimate facilitator.
Next in line is the product owner. So, if the Scrum Master is obsessing over the process, the product owner is relentlessly focused on the value. They're essentially the voice of the customer. They have to balance all those competing stakeholder interests and use real data. We're talking strict, evidence-based decision-making to decide exactly what high-value items the team needs to tackle next. They might use cool techniques like user story mapping or impact mapping to make sure the product backlog is perfectly prioritized. Bottom line, they own the what.
And finally, we have the development team. These are the folks doing the actual heavy lifting. What's absolutely vital here is that they are cross-functional. That means they've got all the skills they need, whether that's design, testing, coding, you name it, to deliver a working product entirely on their own. Plus, they are completely self-managing. The product owner tells them what needs to be built, sure, but the development team figures out exactly how to turn those requirements into a reality. Nobody is micromanaging them or handing out daily tasks. They organize themselves and just get it done.
Moving right along to Section 4, the rhythm of sprints. We'll be covering the key events and artifacts.
You can really think of the sprint as the actual heartbeat of this whole framework. It's a strict, time-boxed period, usually running about 2 to 4 weeks. It kicks off with sprint planning, where you set a clear goal. Then, every 24 hours, the team holds a quick 15-minute daily scrum just to sync up. At the end of that time box, they hold the sprint review to actually physically demonstrate the working product to the stakeholders. And finally, they close the loop with a sprint retrospective, taking a hard look at their internal process so they can work even better in the next cycle. Now, all of those events center around three key artifacts. Everything begins in the product backlog. Think of this as the massive, constantly evolving master list of features. During planning, a specific chunk of that is pulled down into the sprint backlog, which becomes the team's highly transparent to-do list for that current sprint. And all of this effort culminates in the third artifact, the increment. But here is the absolutely critical rule. The increment has to be usable, and it literally must meet the team's shared definition of done to actually count. No exceptions.
Okay, Section 5. Real-world business agility. This is where we see Scrum moving way beyond just software.
Scrum is driving some truly massive agility across entirely different industries these days. Take a company like Tesla, for example. They're relying heavily on Scrum principles to rapidly prototype and iterate on actual physical hardware, prioritizing small, fast experiments over heavy bureaucracy. Or just look at Spotify. They famously structured their massive global organization into agile squads and tribes. They use this exact framework to just completely shatter corporate silos and maintain that self-managing team autonomy, but at a massive global scale. It's pretty incredible to see in action.
Finally, we arrive at Section 6, knowing Scrum's exact limits. Let's talk about when you should absolutely not use Scrum.
Look, if you try to force Scrum into the wrong environment, it is going to fail hard. It struggles heavily in fixed-scope, highly regulated industries, think aerospace or healthcare, where strict compliance makes rapid, iterative delivery really difficult. It also completely suffocates in organizations with rigid, hierarchical cultures that just refuse to let their teams self-manage. And if you're dealing with dozens of massively interconnected teams, pure Scrum honestly isn't going to be enough. You're going to have to layer on heavy-duty scaling frameworks like Save for Less just to manage all that sheer complexity.
So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I want you to take a moment and really evaluate your own workplace. Look closely at your current projects and your team dynamics. Are you truly adapting to complexity through transparency, inspection, and adaptation? Or are you secretly trapped in a waterfall, just crossing your fingers and hoping your rigid plans don't break the second reality hits? The empirical engine is built and ready to go. The next step is entirely yours.